Welcome to bonus episode 24 of the Blooms and Barnacles podcast. I am here today with a great guest that I've wanted to have on for a while, Senan Molony. Welcome, Senan, to Blooms and Barnacles. If you're not familiar with Senan's work, he is a political correspondent at the Irish Independent. Senan is the author of multiple books, including The Phoenix Park Murders, Conspiracy, Betrayal, and Retribution. If you're watching video, you can see on the screen Helen of Joyce, Trojan Horses, and Ulysses, published by Printwell Books. I had the opportunity to see Senan speak at the 2024 International James Joyce Symposium at the University of Glasgow. Welcome to the podcast, Senan Molony. How are you this morning?
Oh, I'm fine. Thank you so much, Kelly. It's a great privilege and honor to be on the podcast.
Absolutely. Senan, I think your presentation this last June in Glasgow is one that has really stuck out in my mind, not only for the topic, but also you're just a fantastic presenter. It really had almost a theatrical or rhetorical quality to it. So.
Oh yes.
And
I remember I had a kidney. I had a bleeding kidney in the presentation.
Not your personal kidney. You revealed from your pocket a brown paper wrapped kidney you got from a butcher. Yes. For a minute, I was like, "You did? Oh no!"
Yeah.
But yes, I do remember that, and I think your decision to bring a bloody organ really was appropriate to your topic, which it was Jack the Ripper references in Ulysses, which might come as a surprise to our listeners because I don't know that Jack the Ripper is mentioned by name in Ulysses.
Indeed, he is. He appears in Circe.
Is he? Okay.
And there's a reference of apropos of Bloom by, in the hue and cry that he is a marked man. Another girl's plat cut wanted Jack the Ripper. Okay. £1,000 reward. Yeah.
I stand corrected.
And then there's also a specific reference to something called the double event, which is a phrase closely associated with the Ripper killings because he killed 2 women on one particular night. Yeah.
Okay. So what led you to this topic, Jack the Ripper in Ulysses?
Gee, it's a very good question. I guess it's just noticing the constant references to kidney that are throughout, and also Joyce's obsession with knife crime, and then the inconvenient truth that we want to overlook in the 21st century, that James Joyce frequented prostitutes. So James Joyce, our famous and well-worshipped author, was frequenting prostitutes regularly in the late 19th century. And in the late 19th century, prostitutes were being killed in Whitechapel by Jack the Ripper, the hitherto undiscovered serial killer whose identity has sparked a whole wave of books and speculations, probably all of them wrong. But there's no doubt that was a massive sensation, the first yellow press sensation. If you like. And Joyce is also obsessed with the yellow press and how they sensationalize murder and make it fodder for sales. And there was an 1870 Education Act that enabled millions of people in the UK and Ireland to read and consume for the first time. And that spawned an upsurge of penny dreadfuls, as we know. And Joyce comments on that, the Halfpenny Press and Harmsworth, who was born here in Dublin, who went up to found the Daily Mail. And it's just an extraordinary coincidence of things that I think led me to say, wait a minute, what's going on here? And I think I have specifics to back up what I'm suggesting, squalid and all as it is.
Absolutely. All those little breadcrumbs you've just shared really make sense. Joyce was very interested in definitely criminal cases, like the child's murder case features very prominently in Ulysses. Why not be interested in more than one true crime case, as we call it nowadays? He was very interested in journalism and the way the press works. Also featured very prominently. And which decade was Jack the Ripper?
Jack the Ripper was in 1888.
Okay.
And in fact, I mean, at one point in Calypso, we have a very specific reference to the fact that Leopold Bloom's daughter, Millie, has just turned 15. It was the day before Thursday, the 16th of June, 1904. So they get the card saying, thanks for the gifts. Leopold Bloom muses, she was 15 yesterday, 15th of the month. Coincidence. So if she's 15 in 1904, that means she was born in 1889, June of 1889. You work back to when she was conceived, that is September 1888. which is the very month when Jack the Ripper is doing his worst. So there seem to be a lot of seeds planted by Joyce that are pointing us in this direction, quite apart from the specific references to Jack the Ripper and the double event.
Okay. You mentioned that you had some great evidence for, Jack the Ripper allusions in Ulysses and Joyce building on that theme. What do you got for me there?
Okay. Well, I think at the very opening of Ulysses, we have an invocation, if you like, about the first Jack the Ripper victim, who was a woman called Mary Ann Nichols. We have Buck Mulligan hewing with a knife vigorously at the loaf, and he sings a snatch. For old Mary Ann, she doesn't care a damn, but sizing up her petticoats, which is a kind of a sex worker analogy. And so we have Buck and we have Mary Ann. We have Buck Mulligan singing about Mary Ann, who hizes up her petticoats. And the body of Mary Ann Nichols was found in Buck's Row at the beginning of the Terror. Yeah. And we also have the fact that Buck Mulligan, don't forget, in this opening episode of Ulysses Telemachus also refers to, I see them cut up into tripes in the dissecting room, which is very, very rude thing to say about, dead people. Okay, it's casual and it's kind of nasty and has overtones.
I think he prefers the term Hyperborean.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, and anyhow, Mary, we're looking at some specifics here. We have Mary Nichols. The surname is spelled with one L, and then we have Bloom in Lotus Eaters passing the Undertakers, which is Nichols, also spelled with one L. And as he goes by Nichols, he thinks of a song, the famous one, "Met once in the park, in the dark, what a lark." And that line is bookended by reference to O'Neill's and police, because of the supposed, the question of a Corny Kelleher. And a policeman called Neil found Mary Nichols' body. That's a similarity in the first place. And there are others. I mean, most prominently, for any doubters, we have the fact that Mr. Leopold Bloom, of course, ate with relish the inner organs of birds and fowls, etc. But then we have mention of a kidney. Most of all, he liked grilled mutton kidneys, which gave to his palate a fine tang of faintly scented urine, famously. And kidneys were in his mind as he moved about the kitchen. He's getting ready Molly's breakfast tray. There was a letter sent to a man called George Lusk during the Ripper hysteria in 1888, which had an enclosure. And that enclosure was a human kidney that was removed from one of the Ripper victims. Obviously, Leopold Bloom himself gets a letter with an enclosure at Westland Road Post Office, which turns out to be harmless flower petals. But this man, Lusk, funny enough, his surname appears in Ulysses. It's included in the list of embryologists, and there was no prominent embryologist called Lusk. There was a nutritionist called Lusk, but it's a very strange name. And also, the police station in Whitechapel in 1888 turns up in Ulysses as well. It was in a place called Lehman Street. And that gets referenced when Garrett Nestor is ranting about how women brought sin into the world and how a fallen woman brought the strangers to our shore. I'm paraphrasing. And he refers to Dermot McMurray, I think, and his wife and her Leman. Leman, very strange word, and means it's cognate with Leafman, which means lover. But Lehman Street was the headquarters of the Jack Ripper investigation in 1888. And subsequently, of course, Scotland Yard took charge because of the number of bodies that were accumulating in the East End of England. In relation to this letter that a chap called Lusk received, he was the head of the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee, which started patrolling the streets in the autumn of 1888. He got this letter with an enclosure of half a human kidney. This is the famous From Hell letter, as people who call themselves ripperologists, which shows you a rather strange infatuation with the murder series. But they refer to this as the From Hell letter. The writer says, who signed himself Jack the Ripper, was the first use of the phrase Jack the Ripper, says, "I send you half the kidney I took from one woman, preserved it for you. T'other half," using an Irishism, "t'other half I fried and ate. It was very nice." Well, this is what Bloom is doing in Ulysses. He fries a kidney and he eats it. We have to look at why kidneys are in his mind and why Bloom is sopping it with dyes of bread and gravy. That phrase, dyes. Now we move on then to how Bloom got the kidney in the first place. we know he went out and from Eccles Street, he turns right into Dorset Street. Well, it turns out that Dorset Street, we say in Ireland Dorset Street, but it's named after the English county Dorset. And there was a Dorset Street in London that played a very prominent part in the Ripper murders of 1888. It's in the heart of Whitechapel. One of the first victims was a woman called Annie Chapman, and she lived on Dorset Street. When Bloom goes to Dlugax, the butcher, there's a woman there with chapped hands, right? So that's seems an echo, but more importantly, Dorset Street is important to the Ripper saga because the final Ripper victim was a woman called Mary Jane Kelly. Her mutilated body was found in her flat in Miller's Court off Dorset Street, and it had the kidneys removed along with other viscera. So this Bloom buying his kidney and so on. I want to refer to a couple of things from the text. We have Bloom entering the butchery where a kidney oozed blood gouts, and he stands by the next door girl. His eyes rest on her vigorous hips, and he thinks, new blood, no followers allowed. So we have no followers, new blood, next girl. He thinks to catch up and walk behind her. I mean, that's a kind of a predatory thing to do.
Absolutely.
And then he thinks also of brown scapulars in tatters defending her both ways, because the scapular would go in front of the chest and there would be another relic at your back. But why does she need to be defended? And furthermore, we have him engaging in a reverie about her crooked skirt swinging whack by whack by whack.
Yeah,
there are these strange overtones and undertones to this encounter. Furthermore, I think there's a link between the girl in the butchery shop on Dorset Street and the policeman, Constable 14A, who's in love with a girl and is hugging her in Eccles Lane. So if you go through that a little, Bloom leches after her and then reflects that she's for another.
He follows her for a while too, which I've always found unseemly.
Yeah, he follows her out hoping to catch a glimpse of her, but then she saunters out off to the right, walking towards the River Liffey, if you like, and Bloom has to go back reluctantly the other way, right? So that's a close encounter. But he thinks of her being for another, a constable off duty cuddling her in Eccles Lane, and she's saying, "Oh, please, Mr. Policeman, I'm lost." Now, Ulysses separately tells us that Constable 14A loves Mary Kelly. Don't forget, Mary Kelly was the final victim of butchery on Dorset Street in London in 1888. There's an implication from these two references of a policeman and his lover. Yeah, so I'm just going to make the point that Mary Kelly, the butchery girl in Dorset Street, Dublin, is twinned with Mary Kelly, butchered in Dorset Street, London, by Jack the Ripper.